I was able to watch Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, so here is my review on the movie, and I just want to say this straight off the bat. This is not a good movie, but before I absolutely, destroy this movie, I want to start off with stuff I did enjoy from this movie, so let's start off with everything I liked about it. For starters, this should be a shock to no one. The special effects in here that we saw from the trailer, it promised that. They look phenomenal now. Of course, Avatar's looks better, Dune looks better, but because there's a couple green screen stuff in here, but other than that, the special effects in here are wonderful. And I did enjoy the main lead and the villain. I enjoyed those two characters the most out of everyone in this movie. I found them to be the most interesting to follow, and I felt like they were unique in a way that made them stand out enough for me to care about them. I also do like the plot, even though I've seen this plot before. I'm a fan of it. It feels like a video game. I mainly seen this plot in video games, not so much movies, but more video games. So I kind of like the storyline because it's actually in a movie this time. And for the pitch of this movie being that this is Zack Snyder's version of Star Wars, for the most part, I did enjoy that. I will talk about that later in a second, but for the most part, I did enjoy that kind of idea. Of course, this is a Zack Snyder film. It is not for everyone, but the slow motion scenes in here, I'm a big fan of that. If you're not a fan of Zack Snyder's movies and are not a fan of his slow-mos, you will not like that, but I did enjoy the slow-mos in here. But with that being said, let's move on to the main part of this video, everything I did not like about the movie. And I watched this movie last night when it aired, and how do you mess up this badly? I've seen interviews. I know everything behind the scenes. Netflix was like, okay, Zack Snyder, you can make this R-rated movie that you want to make, only if you make this PG-13 version of this movie. Hence, this is what we got. Because Netflix wanted to make that release the Snyder Cut kind of trend. So, the director's cut is coming at some point. I do not know when. It's coming at some point. That's what the pitch was for this is Zack Snyder's version of Star Wars, is that movie that we have not gotten yet. So this movie is Netflix's version of Star Wars from Zack Snyder's kind of tone. Because Zack Snyder says the director's cut is a completely different movie. Which I'm curious now on that. Well, I was curious on it in the first place. But then all these problems came, which I'm now going to dive into. So the first hour of this movie is a bunch of exposition because it says in the title it is a part 1. I will dive on that later too. But yeah, so the first hour of this movie I did like. Yes, it is like a bunch of dialogue, but I did really like the first hour of this movie. It was a bunch of setup, and I really enjoyed what they were doing, and it was really setting up the story pretty well. But that's for the like section. Even though I never addressed that, that belongs in that section. But everything else that followed was the main story of the movie. Okay, so what the story is this one person is forming a team. So basically, the rest of the movie after the first hour is, okay, recruit that person, recruit that person, recruit that person. And now, at first, that doesn't seem bad, but every time they go from person to person, it feels like a big chunk of the movie is missing. It feels like that it's just taken out. Like, we recruit the first 2 people, and then when we go to the next person, we're just all of a sudden in a fight scene. Well, not really, but we're just all of a sudden there. And you can obviously tell that there was a scene right there that was taken out of the movie. Like, it is so obvious near the last hour of the movie that there was supposed to be a scene there. There was supposed to be about 20 minutes of the movie right there that they took out. They took parts out of the movie because Zack Snyder made a director's cut first, but Netflix wanted the PG-13 version. So there's chunks taken out of the movie. And everything else that followed that kept that train going. There's chunks taken out of the movie. And by the time we get to the final act, it just cuts there after the final person's recruited. And you forget, like, half of these characters were even recruited in the first place. Because of, like, how the story's told, you forget that these characters were part of that. And then when they do something with the finale that I did not care for, I completely forgot about anything that happened. Just because of how the movie was told, you forget extremely easily about everything in the last hour because of how the movie is chopped up and how it's made. It's just, parts are missing. Parts of Expedition are missing for certain characters, and they really need to fix that. Like, one character introduced, and then like, we don't really get a backstory of him either. He's just shown, and then all of a sudden he's there. And he has nothing to do in the movie, which leads into my next problem. Half the characters you recruit don't even have a role in the movie. You just gather them for no reason. Well, I guess part 2, but you gather, for this movie, you gather these people for no reason, and they have no role. I mean, there's one, or there's 2, but you forget about it. You forget these characters are even in the movie. And it just feels like there's parts of the movie missing, like I said, that explains what this character is here for, and explains their backstory better, because it's just missing. It doesn't work of how, like, sloppy this last hour is. Of just Expedition, cut 20 minutes, and then doing that repeatedly in the last hour. This movie doesn't flow very nicely. This movie is a part 1, it says it in the title, and this movie, it could have been like a full story. What I mean by that is, if you've seen Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, the movie ends, that it solved that part of the story, but there's more to continue. This movie could have ended like that, but it didn't. And they added this scene at the end of the movie that I think is supposed to make you excited, but I did not care for that ending at all. Some people do, some don't. And then, yeah, it's just there. It's interesting. I kind of like where that's going, but I am not very, like, interested in what's happening. I mean, like I said, I am kind of interested in where that's going. I will check out part 2 just because I've seen this movie, but other than that, that felt forced. Could have been a post-credit scene easily. And then, yeah, this movie is not really that pitch that we wanted of Zack Snyder's Star Wars. This movie is more of Netflix's version of Star Wars, and we will get Zack Snyder's version of Star Wars at a later point in time. But right now, this is not the movie that was promised to us, and we'll just have to wait on that. All in all, this is not the movie you want it to be. I mean, like, you can find enjoyment in here, but the last hour of the movie is a complete mess. Everything's chopped up. Everything's, like, rearranged. The first hour of this movie kind of promise you something, but the last hour completely falls apart. Everything's chopped up. And the characters have nothing to do. You forget about stuff. It doesn't really flow nicely. And this is not the version that we want Zack Snyder's Star Wars to be. We will have to wait for the director's cut to come out for that. And I want to see that now. I think that was Netflix's plan all along, is because they wanted to have the same trend as release a Snyder cut. But if you guys could not tell, I do not recommend this movie. There is no point of watching it. I say just wait for the director's cut, even though someone did say that to me, but I didn't listen. So do what you will. But out of 10, I give Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, a 4 out of 10. Yeah, 4 out of 10. But anyways, that was my review on Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Comment down below your thoughts. Follow my letterboxd called The Color Man Movie. And I will see you guys all next time. Goodbye.